Okay, this is a 30-second commercial, and I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you, but please stay with me. In just 15 minutes, you could save 15% or more on car insurance. This company has been offering great rates and great service for over 75 years, and anytime you need help, you can speak to one of their trained specialists 24/7. The company is Geico. Go to geico.com today. Sorry for all the numbers, and in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... I'm out of time.
Now, Podcast One brings you Spike's Car Radio, a downloadable cars and coffee, hosted by writer, comedian, and automotive enthusiast, Spike Ferriston. Now, here's Spike.
Spike's Car Radio, special Porsche-themed episode. Today, I'm going to travel you all the way to Hollywood, to the Petersen Automotive Museum, where a few weeks ago, they had an all-Euro cruise-in. That's their fun way of saying there was a car show there with a lot of cool Porsches and German cars. And I was lucky enough to host a panel on outlaw Porsches and the SoCal hot rodding culture back from the 60s and how it influenced outlaw Porsches. On that panel, Bruce Canepa, Bruce Myer, Dave Bouzaglou from TRE Motorsports, Freeman Thomas, the original founder of the R Group, Patrick Long, Rod Emory, and, of course, me, your favorite Porsche dude. And guess what? I know not all of you can travel to L.A. every weekend for all the Porsche events, so I recorded it for you, and here it is for you to enjoy. Congratulations on getting away from your families on a Sunday. I'm impressed that we're sold out here, and I'm excited to host this panel because I think, I'm not sure I know as much as the guys who are coming up here, and I have so many questions for them, and I think we're going to learn a lot about Southern California racing culture, hot rod culture, racing up on Mulholland, and all of the elements that converged in the old days with the Porsche crowd to create the R Group, the outlaw cars that we know now, and this entire subculture that's suddenly gaining acceptance, at least in the world of Porsche, where preservation used to be the thing, and now these outlaw cars are showing up, and suddenly we all love them. So thank you for the Petersen for doing this. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a panel of 8 guys who are, I think they cover pretty much everything, and let's just get them up here because we're going to run out of time before we know it. Marco Gerassi's coming up here. He's owner and operator of TLG Auto in North Hollywood. Come on, Marco. Just take that end seat right there, Marco. From TRE Motorsports. He's worked on my cars. He does an excellent job with these outlaw cars. Dave Bouzaglou. Come on, Dave. Also, prominent R Group member. Our sponsor today from BBI Autosport, Bedem Barisha. Thank you for sponsoring us. He's an incredible motor builder. I want to ask you about that 1,500 horsepower thing that you're doing, because I drove Bisimoto's 800 horsepower car, and that thing is insane. I can't imagine 1,500 horsepower. From Canepa Motorsport, Bruce Canepa, a legit racer, sells incredible cars. I was on your site for 3 hours last night before my wife made me come to bed. I love this next guy. He's an incredible car designer with great stories, and he's the co-founder of the R Group, Freeman Thomas. Beautiful cars. A driver we love. He's got a little car show called Luftgekalt. Have you ever heard of that? Patrick Long. Star in his own right. Thanks, Patrick. You know, if it weren't for my next guest and his buddy Robert Petersen buying this former department store right here, we wouldn't have this lovely museum. He's the man, Bruce Myer, a fixture on the Southern California car scene and historian. And the guy who's got, I think his family coined the word outlaw, if I'm not mistaken. And he's just got these cars locked up right now. The stuff he's building is just incredible. Rod Emory. Owner and proprietor of Instagram. Welcome, fellas, to the panel. One of these lovely bachelors will go home with one of you ladies out there today. No. And guys, I'm going to ask questions. Feel free to make this conversational and chime in. Again, we all want to learn about this connection, and there's a lot to cover. And I thought we would start with you, Rod, because really it's your family that coins the phrase outlaw, and your grandfather that kind of began it all, right? Fill us in and paint that picture for us and how far it goes back.
Yeah, I think, first of all, this is a great group, and really honored to be up here with all these guys. I think that really all of us are here because of some of the early hot rodders that really originated right here in Southern California. You had guys like John von Neumann and, had Competition Motors and, all the Porsche dealerships that were around here, Bossk Polak. And then you had this whole hot rod culture of guys in the 40s and 50s. And my grandfather was one of those guys. He had a Shop Valley custom shop in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s in North Hollywood. He was one of the pioneers of channeling and sectioning, old custom cars. He got into the Porsche world in 1962, and that's, for me, where I think the Porsche stuff really got into, our bloodline. My dad started at Chick Iverson Volkswagen Porsche in Newport Beach. Back in the 50s and 60s, when these cars were new, coming, into the United States, people were looking at them not really as just transportation, but as something they could just really hot rod out. And guys like Dean Jeffries, which was one of the early customizers in North Hollywood, he took a 57 Carrera, and to my knowledge, it's really the first custom 356. He took a 57 Carrera, an early 356 Carrera, and changed the nose and changed the rear deck lid, and really made a pretty iconic, hot rod 356. And the purists always, kind of hated the fact that there were people out there hot rodding these cars out. But the truth is, Porsche wanted to build cars that people could love and enjoy. And to just answer your question real quick here, the reason that we get kind of credit for coining the term outlaw was because when I was 14 years old, I built my first 356, which was a 53 coupe, and went to a PCA event, a Porsche Club of America event, with my father, and there was no class for us. There was nowhere for us to show our car. And so my dad and I approached a friend of ours, James Cannon, who's actually Freeman's brother-in-law, and is a jeweler, and we said, hey, will you make this little badge for us that we can put on the back of our cars that said 356 Outlaws, with this German Falcon, the back of a 5-mark coin. And that was something that my dad and I have always put on our cars, but also gifted to people like Bada out here in the crowd that kind of followed that same spirit of, hey, even if the purists don't like us, we love these cars. We're going to, do to them what we want. And that's how the term outlaw got associated with customized or hot rodding Porsches.
And how long did it take to get accepted by the Porsche community? Because I feel like the Porsche community is now turning towards you, and now suddenly the preservationists are on the outside.
Well, I think the passing of the torch was last weekend at Amelia Island when PCA honored 356 Outlaws, and we were the honored cars at their works reunion at Amelia Island. So
that's great. There you go. That's awesome.
So I think if you stick with something long enough, sooner or later people will realize that maybe you aren't crazy, or maybe you still are crazy. But it's just something that we've done for years, and so many before us did as well. But it's just now that the general public, the Porsche enthusiasts, everybody's really embracing it. And for me, it's just it's a dream come true, because it's kind of my family's work and my life's work is finally recognized. And there's so many other amazing builders that are doing the same thing. Some of these guys that are on this panel. So.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Bruce, I know you have, your family has about 10 Porsches, and how do you feel about preservation versus outlaw when you make choices? Because it seems like you don't go as far as some.
Right. So growing up here in Southern California, and Neil Emery was like the guy. And one of the things I'm a hot rodder from birth, but Neil Emery used to peak the radiators of the 32 Fords, and that was one of his signatures. And so Valley Custom was like the holy grail of customizers, and I always enjoyed that. And I grew up with Dean Jeffries, so when he did that Porsche, today, I mean, it's real extreme. For my taste, I like to stay a little more traditional. We're building a 72 911S Outlaw at TRE right now with a twin plug 3-liter in it. But I just kind of like to keep it towards what it might have looked like, but adding a few little twists. I did a coupe about 25 years ago. That's a little silver one, and I shipped it to Chicago. I've done Route 66, and I probably have 15,000 miles just in rallies and so forth. But it fits right in my wheelhouse. The hot rod, the Outlaw, and I was at Amelia Island. I went to the most enormous works reunion, and I would say that without a doubt, 90% of the people were at the Outlaw part, because it's creativity. I mean, how many gorgeous stock, turbos and so forth can you see? But then when you see what Rod brings out and some of the other customizers bring out, that's where the interest is. That's when you can really express yourself and be a little different than the crowd. So
right.
I'm all for it, and I love it.
Dave, I want to move down to you now because I want to talk about, and I've been reading up on this. I'm fascinated about the racing that was going on in Mulholland. You were one of those guys up there racing, right?
Yeah.
Before McQueen, it ended at Skyline. There was a track up there, right? It ended at Skyline Drive. Where did it start up on Mulholland? Where's the racetrack?
Well, the traditional route would start at Coldwater and going east. And before Laurel Canyon, there was a residential area, which essentially started at Skyline Drive. So rather than really anger the residents that lived in that area, people would turn around there, and pretty much we were left alone till things really grew and got out of hand.
Now, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours who said something about aircraft light to light up the racetrack, that you would steal aircraft lights or something. What is that story?
That got twisted a little bit. We discovered there was a little accessory shop in Burbank that was selling all sorts of little accessories. We walked in there one day and we saw these clear lensed lamps, and on the box, a General Electric aircraft. It's like, oh, this will fit in the high beam socket of the Datsun 510. This will fit in the high beam socket of my Pontiac, So that's what we did. We notched the bezels to make them fit, and we had 100 watts of unadulterated pure sunshine.
Wow. And so take us through a race here. I want to talk about how you set the cars up, but like when you say you're racing, are you guys, you're not side by side, you're just racing for the quickest lap time, or?
Typically what would happen is you'd choose a little race and you'd follow the guy in front of you. You wouldn't try to pass him because the road is just too narrow, and of course you're dealing with oncoming traffic and other residents, deer and rabbits, etc. So if you kept up with him all the way down the hill to Skyline, you turn around, now you lead, and if you lost him, then you won.
Wow. And how would you set a car up? Because this, to me, is like the beginning of this outlaw, our group Porsche thing, where you're building a car. It's a sport purpose car, but you're going to road race it. So what were you doing to these cars? Were they Porsches?
The majority of the group up there were economy sedans and sports cars. Austin Healey Sprites, a lot of Mini Coopers. Those were kings of the mountain for quite a while. Then we moved on to the Capris, which had a lot of torque, and we ran race tires. They were $25 a piece, brand new from Carroll Shelby, and we ran race tires all the time. The fine was something like $100 if you got caught by the cops running slicks, but it didn't stop us from going with the racing blue streaks at the time. So that was a lot of fun. The Porsches were a little bit few and far between. At the beginning, there were some speedsters and some cabs, 356 cabs that come through there, ripping through. But for the most part, it was more the economy cars. And of course, you had what we call the rich kids from Beverly Hills. They had their XKEs or the later Corvette, which never did very well. But anyway, my first big influence in Porsche was a really nice guy named Scott, and he had gotten a blue metallic 911S, for his birthday. And he came up there, and he was wise. He didn't want to race much. He just wanted to tootle around. But the car really was quite an impression on me. So when it was time to get a Porsche, I was able to find one and help put it together with the shop owner over on Ventura Boulevard. And I started playing around up there. I discovered why you must respect Porsches when it comes to turns. You never ever let off in the middle of a turn or over a hill. So ended up doing a tank slapper back and forth, but fortunately nothing bad came of it. And from then on, I ramped up to learn how to drive it properly.
Wow. And these races, again, it's like I didn't know you were part of the Fast and Furious cast up there. They began, when did they start? Like after dark? Did they go all night? Were they organized?
There was nothing really organized. Essentially, just hung out. We had the stoners that would typically smoke pot in the grandstand area.
Reefers? They were smoking reefers?
Yeah, reefers.
Okay.
And up on Beaumont, we had the guys that tended to tipple a little bit, with a little bit of booze, but not much. That was frowned upon. We really wanted to show car control. And the group on Beaumont, we would go to slaloms all the time on, weekends. We would start in the evening. Typically you'd go out with your date, what have you, go drop her off, and go rushing up to Mulholland to meet the guys to go play around. So that's what we would do. And some girls also joined in. There was a gal in the 240Z, another one in the 510, another one in the Volvo. And it was a lot of fun. It was a big social gathering. It was safe at the time. We'd stay up there 2, 3 in the morning. We'd come down the hill for a while to go to Denny's or Dupar's or...
And no police? No police at all?
There was very little police at first. Then they had so many people coming up because they chased people off of cruising Van Nuys Boulevard. Mm-hmm. So they'd all come up in Mulholland. So it started getting pretty rowdy where they're throwing beer bottles at residents that were driving by. So that had the intended consequences of a visit by black and whites.
There you go.
So it came to a somewhat of a halt when they did a pair of what they called the Big Bust. So we were fortunate. We were up there one evening on Beaumont, and there was probably about 50, 60 cars in the grandstand area, and they're all having a ruckus of a time and everything, and a police car goes cruising by really slowly and doesn't stop. So something, just hair on the back of my neck, stood up a little bit, and I said, guys, that's not a good sign. Usually they stop, they tell us to get the heck out of here. So we left, and not more than 20 minutes after we left, they closed off both sides of Mulholland and towed away a whole bunch of cars and arrested a bunch of people.
And that was it, right. It was shut down formally in the 80s.
Yeah, it was. And the road has been in disrepair for quite a number of years, so your suspension better be soft.
There you go.
When you know the road, it's a lot of fun. And, of course, you always have to maintain safety from the standpoint of oncoming cars. It's not your road. It's a public road. So from that standpoint, it's fine. But
now, let me just ask you, anybody else on the panel, any of you guys, were you up there racing? Bruce?
Nope.
No?
That's his story, and he's sticking to it.
All right, let's segue into our...
Patrick said maybe.
Because we're too young. Freeman is credited with co-founding the R Group with Chris Huergas, right? And that whole group is founded on a single car. It was a 69 911 that he had hot rodded? Tell us the story of how this group was founded and why.
Yeah. This is on. Hello? Back in the late 90s, Chris and his brothers were interviewed by Excellence Magazine, and they were all in a great feature in there. And there were a lot of us down in SoCal that had cars, and we were also kind of looking at everything from the sports purpose and really trying to make the cars, from a performance standpoint, the way they were back in the 60s and the 70s, the early 911s. And so I gave Chris.
Just hand him another mic. That's fine.
There you go. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I had to. I went ahead and called up Chris. I found his number through, I think it was Pete Stout, and got his number. And we were on the phone probably for hours, talking about this culture that was going on. And in the end, we decided, why don't we group together and we'll create this group. And we experimented around with names and words and so forth, and we came up with the name R Group. And I think that the group, none of us feel as though we invented this culture. It's really what we want to do is create a home for this culture. It was things what Dave was talking about back in the 60s and in the 70s and with the Outlaws with Gary and Rod, but what we wanted to do was get together with all this stuff. And so we ended up using the Porsche Sports Purpose manual as kind of the Bible for what this was. And then part of it was also that there was this SoCal hot rod culture that just couldn't leave well enough alone. And then, of course, there was Steve McQueen, movie Le Mans. How many of us were the only ones in the drive-in theater watching Le Mans, right? So, and of course, I grew up in Southern California, and I was Jeff Swartz's neighbor, 1968. And Jeff actually kind of infected me with this whole thing because his dad had a 901, and that 901 by 1968, the original engine was gone. It was built to 911S. It had a used 911S engine in it, built by a guy named Edgar. Yep. 911R wheels, lowered, sport seats. And at that point, the look, the stance, the sound, the feel, it was sort of there. And every once in a while you'll see, and it was a rare sight in those days to see, a 911 or a modified 911. And so when I started talking with Chris, I think this was an idea that if we could, and this is kind of really before internet really started getting used, and we were using snail mail and photos and stuff like that. And so we ended up doing this first meet down Southern California, and we all came together. And we even had, Jeff came there with, you brought your 964 rally car, I think, to that, right? And what was the name of the park? It was Fullerton. Muckenthaler, yeah. And I see a lot of people that were there on that first time, and we knew that magic had just started. That seat was going. And we knew also that this thing was on the fringes as well, because these cars weren't really welcome on the roads, because a lot of these cars were loud. They were running full 911R exhaust systems, 46 millimeter Webers, open velocity stacks, center fill, and that time it was so hard to get the parts. But the only parts you could get were the real parts or parts that you built yourself. Mm-hmm. And so from that point on, I think it just grew and the look grew. And
was there a framework for the cars? Did you have a definition of what they had to be?
Yeah, it was a little bit loose. We sort of said, we're only going to have enough rules so the whole thing doesn't fall apart. And
so you're limited to 300 guys too.
Yeah.
Why?
That was only way later, once it started to grow, and it started growing internationally.
And everybody wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, and we had some great honorary members. I mean, Bruce is an honorary member, and I think between Bruce, you guys fought over number 935 versus 962, right?
Number?
And then they had to trade.
Oh, God.
So, and we've got some
hilarious.
Amazing people. I mean, it's really about the people. It's about the groups. It's about the cars. And we said there was 3 elements that made up an R group of car. And the first part was Porsche Sports Purpose. It had to sort of fulfill that like the catalog, which was this tried and true, mechanical specification. It wasn't like hot rods going into custom cars. This was real hot rodding. These guys drove on the track. They were parts of other groups, and they were parts of the S Registry or other Porsche groups, or they were racers. We had Milt Mintner come to that first group, and we asked him, "What number do you want?" He goes, "I want my race number, 00." So, and then we decided that that was one part. The next part was SoCal Hot Rod. If it looked right, it was right. And we really, I'll be honest, it gets into real subjective territory here, because a lot of times when we do the GT Award, it's Chris and myself, and we might add a guest in there as we walk through the crowd, and we're not into replicating a car. We really want originals. We want original thinking. And a lot, that's why you have a car like Raleigh Risso's 66, that every panel on the car is a different color, and it becomes an icon on its own. And then of course there's Chris's car. Chris had half of his underbody scraped away because he wanted to take more weight out of the car, but he never finished it. You know, so
There were a couple of members, before I move on, there were a couple of members you wanted to mention.
yeah, that was Roger Grego and Tony.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
If you're our group member, raise your hand.
hands.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're here. You're not in our group.
And I tell you, you know, and Roger was, you know, part of the VW hot rod group, which was their Kleiner Panzer. So, and you know, part of the group is this really humble approach. You know, it's part of, you know, I worked at Porsche for about 7 years, and one of the things I can tell you about the people that worked in Weissach were that you knew their names, but you didn't. They didn't scream who they were. They really their developments were legendary, but the people were human. They were just regular people coming in and just having this amazing opportunity. Roger was one of those guys. Roger was a guy that I remember first seeing his Aubergine 911, and it was a look that I remember before I even met Roger. It was something you said, that's inspiring, that's amazing, you know, and it was an original. And and I think that we continue to be surprised today, and I think this whole outlaw culture has sort of gone, like you were saying, Spike, has gone past the, you know, preservation versus the modification. And it really sort of follows the American hot rod, where they become originals to themselves. And life is short. You know, build what you want.
That's a good jumping off point. Patrick Long, who, I remember this conversation I had with you long ago when you were starting Luftgekühlt, where, you know, and I want to say congratulations for reinventing the car show, because you've made it such a wonderful experience for a new generation of people. I'm seeing women at car shows now, which I have not seen before. But you said, I want to do a show that's inclusive, that can have $1 million car right next to a car a guy built in the garage, and nobody's going to be walking around judging or saying a screw isn't turned the right way. And I'm so impressed that you pulled it off. And the next one's coming up in a couple of weeks, right? Where's that going to be?
It's April 22nd in Torrance.
Right. And you guys built a car. A few of you built a car that was an outlaw car. It was a safari car. Tell me why you did that and what that car was about. And by the way, explain this safari thing to me. What is the deal with safari cars?
I'm still trying to figure that out myself. The idea behind Luftgekühlt was sort of the same idea behind building a car. It was to sort of disrupt and shake up your thinking. Safaris is not a new element with Porsche's history and what they've done in the East African Safari. Obviously, rally, Pikes Peak, many different applications on 911 had really exceeded expectations off-road. And it really comes back to what we're talking about today, which is Southern California meets Stuttgart. If you drive around Southern California, your car better be able to take potholes. It better be able to go over a median. It better be able to sit a little higher, because you probably have an F-150 up your rear. And so we wanted a car that would kind of tell the story of Luftgekühlt disrupting what maybe the regular thought process might have been pushed onto us. And I'm not a car builder. I couldn't, you know, hold the flashlight for a lot of guys that are up on this stage. But I do have their phone numbers. So I could spiral off into story after story, but Rod, but Tim, many of the people up here, you know, I met long before I ever owned an air-cooled Porsche at the racetrack. The last 15 years of my life has been centered around working for Weissach and going where they tell me, and I was able to meet these characters through racing. And what I started to understand is that the people who worked in racing on the weekends worked during the week, owning their own shop or customizing cars. And there was this really, really close network between modern Porsche racing, America Le Mans, IMSA, Daytona Le Mans, you name it, and some of the legends in the modification of the Southern California culture. So I just decided that if we were going to commission this car, everybody was going to have to throw in. It was going to be for charity. And why not make it something fun and something that a little different?
Now, when you build a car, you must build a car, because I know you're working on a couple things right now. You must build it from a driver's point of view. For those of us out there who may want to embark on this path, what do you look for as a driver in an Outlaw Porsche?
I want something that's practical, versatile, but really ignites the senses. For me, when I'm driving a car, I can't see it from the outside. So the thought process is building it from the driver's seat out.
Right.
And so a lot of the projects that I've been involved with are pretty plain to the naked eye. The first safari car that we built was just pure white. I wanted it to look like it rolled off the assembly line in Zuffenhausen. And the aspects of weight, high revving engine, all the principles that Porsche built their company on are the things that as a driver you really want. You want a car that the brakes are going to last for 24 hours. You want a car that the tires are going to be there at the end of an hour stint. And maybe 4,000 hours I've spent in a Porsche race car on a racetrack in my office. So I don't need a car that's super stiff or really a race car for the street. I sort of have old blood within inside of me, but there is that time when somebody kind of comes up behind you and thinks they've got you covered, and you always want a little bit more.
There you go. Do you see, and I know you don't speak for the factory, but are we at a point now with the 911R just coming out that the factory is suddenly listening to you guys and going, hey, look what Rod Emory just did with that car? You know what I mean? Do you hear talk like that when you're back there, that maybe some of this stuff will be incorporated into the new stuff?
No comment. Yeah, it's upon us. I mean, of course, we know about the air-cooled movement. We know about the lightweight modification. We see celebrations and recognition of the 911T, of the 911R. And a lot of that, as everybody's talking about, was born in Southern California,
right,
on that aspect of what we do to our cars here, but of course, going back again to the principles of driving through the Austrian mountains and what the Porsche family was engineering and designing, even before Porsche was a car company, as designers for other car companies, race cars, street cars, that principle lives within inside of that intelligent performance of lighter and quicker and more agile. I think that's really what hot rodding cars is really about.
And electric soon. And electric cars.
Yeah, going back more analog.
There's just been some talk from Porsche this week about the future of electric cars. Bruce Canepa over there, who's, were you sleeping, Bruce? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you to sleep over there. I couldn't see you behind Freeman's head. What I love about your business is you're a guy who's out there racing, but for the longest time you were bringing in these outlaw cars onto your site. And I thought maybe you could provide some perspective on what these cars are valued at, what makes them valuable, and where they started and where they are right now.
Well, I never really looked at them so much as outlaw cars, but more just cars that were developed to be a lot more fun than just a perfect stock original car. And, I think there's obviously a respect for the original cars, but I think if you look at Porsche, especially as a company, every time they develop a new car, from year to year, it's to make it better. Better in terms of utility, better in terms of speed, handling, braking, all levels of performance. So really, that's what these cars are. They're just kind of the next generation of that, done by independent people with lots of different great ideas.
Do you find that these cars are easier to sell now than they were maybe, say, 10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we see a lot of them selling for considerably more money than an original stock car does. And of course, for a lot of guys, the investment to build them that way was more also. But there's a real thirst for a car that you get in and it's, it can blow the doors off a Prius, which is
that's anything, Bruce.
Which is
a rickshaw could blow the doors off a Prius.
Yeah, but the reality is all those Priuses are going 80 miles an hour down the freeway, and they get to use that other lane. So, in the Porsche, you have to use all the other lanes from left to right to keep up with it. So you need a car that handles really good to do that. But no, the reality is, modern cars are all fast. I mean, everything you buy now has a lot of performance, handles well. I've never seen so many cars that are incredible to drive as we see today. And, these old cars would be just old cars if you didn't do these things to them. So whether it's a 356 or an early 911, or even what we do now with 959s, I mean, we're bringing these cars up to modern standards, which makes them fun to drive. And it's And like Patrick said, it's when you're in the car, you're not standing outside looking at it. You're absolutely part of everything it's capable of doing. And it gets to test you at the same time, which is really fun.
I was going to ask you about those 959s. Go into a little more detail about what you're doing with those cars, because you're using traditional Porsche colors, right? What are you doing to the engines?
Well, so what over the years we've been developing that car since '87, when we first brought those cars to this country, and we first had to deal with emissions. And in the course of dealing with emissions, we learned that if you were going to make an emissions legal, it would lose 100 horsepower. And by the time we got the law passed to make them to where we could drive them at all, they were 10 years old. So the reality was that there were lots of cars that had 450 horsepower by the late 90s, and that's when the bill was passed. So we were looking to improve on that based on other cars that you could buy, and we've continued to do that. And now we're at a point, the car is 30 years old, which is hard to believe, but it's 30 years old. So we're finding that the cars are timed out, that the HVAC systems are kind of falling apart, and hoses and some of the wiring stuff and insulation, and a lot of them, it's the one supercar that Porsche built that is driven a lot. When they built it, we see lots of them with 30, 40, 50, 60,000 miles on them. And normally, if you had a Ferrari supercar, it has 500 miles on it. So it's a car that people found was comfortable, was extremely fast, handled in the rain as good as it does on the dry, which people don't like to ride in when I do that, but it does. It's amazing in the rain, that car.
Wow.
And, it's an all-wheel drive car. It's got great visibility. It's got almost zero fatigue after half a day or a whole day driving it. And, of course, it's a 911. I tell guys it's still a 911 if you really look underneath all of it. So now we've seen, these car people say, well, I want you to find me a new 959 or a low mileage 959. And there's not many of those left. They built 290 cars, and, there's not many that have a couple thousand miles or 5,000 miles or anything. So we're now taking what we call used cars, which if they're in original condition and the paint's tired and the upholstery's tired, we're disassembling them down to a bare tub. And every component in the car is restored, rebuilt to brand new. Every finish, every surface. It's shocking. There's 3,500 parts in that car that are zinc-plated gold. 3,500. Nuts, bolts, washers, brackets. The plating guy had a fit when we first showed up with the first car. And I said, you have to keep all these separated in these bags and all this stuff. So, and now, of course, we've been developing this car. So our latest version is making 802 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque on pump gas, on 91 octane fuel. And this is a 2.88 liter motor. We're not making it bigger. We're not really adding much more boost in it. It was pretty much at the limit of boost. This is modern technology. This is engine management systems and new turbos, and we did change the cam profile and intake stuff and injectors and all those kinds of things, which is why all modern cars fast. They're really still compressors with a lot of modern technology on them. So we've done that with the car, and the nice thing was Porsche had told us at Weissach a long time ago it was a 800 horsepower platform. It was a Group B car designed for 800 horse. So we're not having failures in the braking systems or the all-wheel drive systems or the transmissions or anything. Everything else is fine up to the task. Wow. And of course they won Perry Dakar and they ran the car at Le Mans, so it was developed to be a race car. So with this, we're now doing color changes. Doing Porsche to sample kind of colors. We did the emerald green one, with probably everybody's seen by now, that was at Luftig last year, and we've just done a navy blue one with red and a tangerine orange one with tobacco brown, and a liquid silver one's getting done with dark green leather. And we're just taking all of Porsche's great sample colors and offering those to customers, and we're basically building these cars brand new. And it is still probably the most drivable modern supercar in the world.
Yeah, that's the Pappas car, right? It
Yes,
set a new
Tim's car, yeah.
Yeah, it set a new land speed record at Scottsdale in January.
He did.
Yeah.
And he blew off a Ferrari doing
Ferrari
it.
F12, right. Couldn't keep up with him. Bedham is, you guys are, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're primarily known as engine builders, right? And preparing cars for motorsport.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Engines is a passion. We do full vehicle builds, kind of taking a page out of everybody in this room's book with modifying cars, except we modified the new ones.
And are you mostly working with people on the racetrack or guys who want road cars?
You know, when BBI first started, it was primarily race cars. That's where I met Pat Long and Rod Emory. I met Pat at Le Mans and Rod at Daytona when I used to work for Porsche. I actually wanted to back it up. What started my obsession with Porsche was a 959, was Bill Gates' car in Bellevue, Washington. I know there's no offense to the panel, this dates you guys except for Pat, but I was 8 years old and I watched this 959 go by with my cousin, and we both jumped up and down, ran in the house, looked up the pictures in the magazine and said that was really one of those things, and we've heard about this car. And ever since then, I was absolutely obsessed with Porsche. And it was funny that when I tell that story, I get goosebumps. It burned that big of a memory. And then, so we fast forward, I started working for Porsche, and even before that, with the R group, I met Randy Wells, and he used to bring his car to service at a shop that I was sweeping the floors for. And there's another guy in this room, Jeff Zwart. In that shop, there was a poster in the restroom. No offense, but it had his 993 sliding up Pikes Peak, and he signed the poster, and it said, I want to remember, it said 4 times champion, and then under the signature, he X'd out and said 5 time. And at that point, I started really looking at these cars as how capable are they, and that touches on what Patrick was saying with the Safari car. Why not? The cars are unbelievably capable, and I started looking at the cars as a canvas, as you could do anything with them.
And tell us about this 1,500 horsepower motor. What in God's name is that used for? Who is doing that, and for what purpose? And is there a turbo involved? Because I thought Bisimoto was the only guy building these monster engines.
Yeah. So
and wait, you say this engine, you deliver it perfectly. You deliver the power to the road perfectly. Explain that to me. I'm so intrigued.
The goal is, the power is one thing, but putting it down and doing it in a manner where the car, you have to build the entire car around that package. But I had a crazy customer out of Oklahoma that was a street racer, and he said, I've got a 996 turbo. I want to beat everybody with these twin-turbo Lamborghinis. And I said, okay, so I like the high-revving GT3 engine, and I like the power of a turbo. We combined those two with a lot of other things that Bruce was talking about, technology and injectors, and the fuel line going to it is bigger than your garden hose. And we run it on alcohol, and it spins to 9,300 RPMs, and to the tires, or we had the dyno that bolts to the wheels that was making 1,540 horsepower at 8,600 RPMs. And I'm not even kidding you, in second gear, you could put the power down, so he uses it for airstrip events. And what we use it for is learning more about the Metzger. And we learned a lot about breaking Metzgers. And so, bending wrist pins, twisting cases. One thing that's never failed on that is a crankshaft. I have always used the OEM crankshaft and never messed with it, never changed the oiling, never any of that. So it just goes back and proves how overbuilt these cars are. And it's pretty incredible.
Thank you. I want to get to Marco, and then we're going to ask, you guys can ask some questions because you have a big resource here if you're building something of your own. But Marco, when you sent me, I asked for a little information from everybody, and Marco sent me a very interesting email. He learned to drive on a 1969 911 Softie with a 2.8-liter RSR motor. That was the car he learned to drive on. And he built, at 16, a 73 914-6 hot rod conversion with a 2.4S motor, 911 motor, beautiful, that he drove to prom and delivered pizza in. Marco Gerasi from TLG, give us a state of the market about what your shop does and what people are coming in these days and asking for, the common modifications.
Well, unlike Rod or Bruce or Tim or Dave even, we're primarily a service shop. My dad opened the place in '78, and I grew up in the building, sweeping floors, washing parts, just working away, going to car shows with my stuff, and learning how to fix these things. And people these days, compared to as I was growing up, they want them to just run and enjoy the drive. They want them to start every time. They want them to go from here to New York and back again. They want to be able to enjoy the cars for what they are. All cars, from the 50s all the way up to 2018. And, you know, then I have the other clients who just want to go fast. And you build them a 2.8 twin plug or a 3.2 twin plug or, you know, turbo motor or what have you. And I don't know. It's hard to say kind of how I fit into this. I grew up doing this. I built that 914. I joined the R group as a 914 owner, which was like unheard of because it was 911 only way back then. My dad and I were a team, you know, and I learned hot rodding from him. Dan, who's floating around here with the camera, he and I went to high school together, and on Friday nights we'd go to the Cruisers car wash, and we'd look at all the hot rods and the muscle cars, and, you know, I would bring my 72 van with a 2.7 motor in it, you know, and he'd bring his 68 fastback. And so I grew up around the hot rod scene. And as I got older, I learned that hot rodding Porsches was what I wanted to do. I don't know. We're more of a service-based business, and we keep them running, build motors, and I enjoy building cars with original parts. I've spent a lot of my life sourcing and searching for the really hard-to-find 911R wheels and, you know, 906 cams and, you know, slide valve fuel injection and high butterfly.
And where do you find that stuff?
Yep.
Because I noticed it's not on eBay anymore.
No, it's not on
the
eBay
back
anymore.
of Hemmings anymore.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
By the way, just to as an example, symbol of your commitment, you got to show your tattoo.
Oh, the wrench?
Oh, there you go. Look at that.
And by the way, that's metric, I assume.
Oh yeah, 13 millimeter Sawwilly wrench. Yeah. It's back here. Well, I have Porsche crest on the back too. But anyway, so you know, I pride myself on using original parts and building these cars the way they were built originally, because I want that driving experience. I want that feel, that smell. You know, that oily smell, that fuel smell, and you know, it's not about being the fastest. It's about enjoying the drive and really getting that time warp. You know, it's getting in the way back machine and turning the key and knowing it'll start and knowing it'll run throughout the course of your drive and however you want to use it, whether it be daily, whether it be at the racetrack or what have you. And it's just something I've been thinking about with the whole outlaw thing. I think Porsche really is the ultimate factory outlaw in that, look at their racing programs, right? They took a stock-bodied, stock chassis car and they stuffed the biggest motor, the biggest brakes they could in it. You got the RSRs with the big wide wheels and the flares. And then, you know, guys like Bruce who've been racing 935s. The 935 is the ultimate outlaw car. And I grew up watching these things and wanting them. And so now that I'm in this position, I can give that love and that vibe to my clients and to the people who love and want that thing, that emotion.
There you go.
So that's where I come from.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open it up to questions. If there's something we didn't cover, I can hear you there. I'll just repeat the question. Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, it's probably different for everybody up there, but Rod, what are some of your subjective parameters that you feel like you're not going to achieve these to go outside of the proper last body or you're not going to do anything like OEM? Everyone's going to have that different answer, I think. Probably ask the wrong guy.
Just repeat the question so the listeners can hear it.
Yeah, so the question is what I'm willing to do or not to do in the cars that I build. You know, for me, you know, I grew up in a Porsche parts business. My dad was in the Porsche parts business, had Gary Emery. He started Porsche Parts Obsolete, which was really all of Porsche's distributor obsolescence, the stuff that they didn't have any room for in the parts departments, was all sent back to a warehouse. And my dad and his boss, Chick Iverson, bought all the overstock. And so growing up as a kid, my playground was a big parts warehouse. And so if you look at the cars that I build, there aren't parts on it from Summit Racing or Napa Auto Parts. It's all Porsche parts. And so for me, it's all about using every possible Porsche part I can, but no limit in the year or model of car. So I'm not afraid to take 964 chassis and running gear and, you know, merge it with a 356. The engine that we build is 2/3 of a 911. It's all factory parts inside. And so, to answer your question, I do have certain limits as to what I'll do to cars. It just has to be something that Porsche would have done if they could have back in the 50s and 60s to a 356, if they had access to their parts in the future.
Leo, a hand in the front there, yes.
Dave, historically, if you built the Brown Bomber, Rob Dickinson, was the inspiration singers. What's your take on that? Freeman, the work on the blues and this stuff.
This is a two-part question. Dave Bouzaglou, you built the original Rob Dickinson car that they...
I guess you could call it Singer Zero.
Singer 000,
Okay.
right.
Rob came to me with a dream, a vision. And he says, I've got this 69 911, and it was mildly hot-rodded by a gentleman up in the Ventura area, and he wanted to personalize it. He had a very, very, very specific set of specs that he wanted to employ on the car. So it was a little rough patch at first, going back and forth, because he had very high expectations, and it wasn't so easily met, especially on the budget that he had. So anyway, we worked through it quite well. We became good friends over the project. It turned into just a really nice, fun car. He stuffed really large wheels underneath as standard a body as possible. He stretched the tires out over the rims because he was all about the stance. The stance, the stance, the stance. They had to sit a certain way, and he expected the performance to go with it. So we worked with him on the suspension as well. Worked with a friend of ours, Kevin Menser, on the bodywork and paint. Got that together for him. And it was a lot of fun. He showed up. He participated in a lot of our group events at first before he embarked with the actual Singer manufacturing. So that car's always been his inspiration. He still has it. He's done a light restoration to it since, and it's great. We're really proud to be part of it.
And you get it 10% of every Singer sold? That's right. Is that how that worked? And what was your second question? Here, they have a microphone there. You can ask right into there.
Yeah, a lot of you probably haven't seen what the new roof car is, but if you'll Google roof SCR and the new CTR, basically, I've known Alois Roof for about 16 years. I've gotten to know him really well. And so I've taken a lot of trips over to Germany and behind the scenes been strategizing and helping him with, what to do in the future. And about 12 years ago, we sat in a hotel room in New York City, and I sketched out a full strategy for him, because Alois Roof is really probably for Europe the original Outlaw of the 911. And really, 1987, when he showed up with at the Volkswagen test track with his original CTR against the 959, against all of the greats from from Europe, and Callaway and all the others, and that car did 211, and consistently with Paul Freer and Phil Hill. And I just got back on Friday night from being at Roof, and he has this videotape that we were actually with some of the writers from Road and Track in his living room watching this videotape from 1987 that was filmed by Richard Barron, who was the art director for Road and Track, and it's a complete, off of his own video camera, and it lasts for about an hour. And history is being made right there, because kind of like, the ultimate outlaw is performance. And that car was amazing. And so he created, pop culture right there. He had this car, he had this brand, he had, and from that point on, there was no really going back. And so about 12 years ago, we started to strategize. We talk about using the Porsche parts, and we started looking at that. And I worked at Porsche for 7 years in Bouzaglou. And part of the thing is that this stuff gets under your skin, starting off, growing up next to Jeff. How could you not, get into this? And the thing is, though, that you start thinking this way. And if you had a clean sheet of paper, what would you do? I mean, I was fortunate enough to work on 959 as a designer during the 80s. I worked with Helmut Bott, and you learn from the way these guys think, the way they move forward. And what Alois wanted to do was, he said, I don't want to change the length of this car. I don't want to change this magic cockpit. The cockpit, when you talk to his test driver, Stefan Roser, the guy that is driving the Yellowbird on the Nürburgring in the Green Hell, and you talk to him, what is it about this cockpit? He says, it's the A-pillars. Those A-pillars have got to be where they are because the new cars put their A-pillars further forward, and you can't see in the corners. And you want to be in the corner with your visibility. And so we decided from the get-go that we would take this cockpit. That's the part. And then we started doing a couple mock-ups. We started tearing up some cars and just, putting the wheels where they should go without changing the length. That meant new gearbox from ZF. That meant, new 7-speed gearbox. That's more compact dimensions. We looked at the 935, the way that the axles were pushed up into the body. So we did that. And we pushed the wheelbase out. We pushed it out to 997 wheelbase. So the front overhang became 20 less, rear 50 less. And then tire ODs got bigger. The width of the car is wider than the 959. We pushed the door sections. We didn't change the glass house, but we pushed the door sections out 30 millimeters aside. It's like the car went to the gym. And it's amazing. And to me, the testament of all of this was I just got back. We went to the Geneva Auto Show just a couple weeks ago. We drove the prototype there through the snow, through the rain, getting up to speeds close to 300 Ks on the Autobahn, in the rain. And it's a full carbon tub, full carbon body, pushing the envelope of all of this to the next level of what is original. There's not one. The only thing that's left is that Metzger block. And pretty soon, that'll go to the next level because he's come to, just like we were talking about on the panel, you were figuring that out. And so, and it's all push rod suspension. It's analog, manual gearbox. No electronic aids are traction control and ABS and great aerodynamics. But to me, this is pushing the envelope, and I love that. Just as, I listen to all of the people up on the panel, and I look at the people in the audience that have done some pretty pioneering stuff. The future, coming out of, I've been 35 years working for the auto industry, knowing what their limits are. I really think that this outlaw thing is going to only get bigger, because it's kind of becoming the niche. We're getting into electrification. We're getting into all the stuff that driver aids. It's really the outlaw way. We want to drive this stuff ourselves. By the way, the car's 1,250 kilos. That's pretty light when you start to look at it. So, I don't know. Sam, did I answer your question?
One more thing. Marco, how many places on Bouzaglou meet you got canned? I'm never going to come back to it.
Yeah, the R group gets kicked out of a lot of places.
You have a question? Sure, go ahead. I'll just do it from here. Go ahead. You can just say it. We can hear you.
Extremely interesting. Thank you very much. A question to anybody in the panel about Gunther Works and how would that compare to the Singer cars?
So the Gunther Works cars, how do they compare to the Singer cars? Anybody, whoever wants to, go ahead. Marco, you seem to have an opinion.
I think they're very similar ideas on two separate platforms. At first, I maybe wasn't sold on either one. But as you watch...
the Gunther Works, they're 993s?
The Gunther Works is a 993 chassis where the Singers use 964 chassis.
Right. Okay,
so I think that the Gunther Works saw what Singer went through developmentally and said, okay, well, thanks for doing the hard work. We're going to try and do it another way. And I think they built on each other, and I think that's a good thing. It's more of a, if I had unlimited funds, what car would I build? And the Gunther Works was the result of that, that approach. They use amazing motors from Jeff up at Gamroth, Jeff Gamroth at Roth Sport. I know that, E-Motion, Joey Seeley's doing the suspension work. So, there's a lot of good brains involved in the process. The car.
What do they cost, the Gunther Work cars? Because the Singer cars are now, they're about past $500,000.
They're about the same.
Right?
Yeah, as far as I know, they're comparable price-wise. I've never driven.
How many cars have they built?
I think just one so far.
We just have the
but
one.
I believe there are standing orders. I'm not, I don't know, but I've drove some of the early Singer stuff when they were just starting to get things going. And I got to say, it's amazing to see how far they've come.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be your cup of tea, but you cannot fault them for what they've done. It's brilliant. They brought Outlaws and 964s and backdating to the mainstream, and that's good for everybody in here. It's, what's old is new again, right?
There you go.
So I think that's fantastic.
That good?
I can't. That's not to speak to that. I mean,
He's asking if the prices are justifiable.
I mean,
No, of course not.
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd
But
love to be able
somebody's
to
going to
afford
pay
one.
it. That is justified.
Wish I could afford one.
What I meant by that side question is whether somebody like you guys in the panel, could you put those cars together as a hot rod, something comparable to those cars for much less money? That's
a good question. So could you make something comparable to a Singer car for much less money?
I might
Just
take
say
that.
yes, and
Yeah.
you have a customer right here.
Yes, no, but both of those cars, I think they've taken different approaches, trying to end up at the same place. They've both done amazing jobs. To answer your last question, we're building a 993 currently right now, doing a hot rod car, and it's rocker-mounted suspension. We've taken the uprights from a 997 RSR and built our own control arms to correct all the geometry. It's got brakes from a 991 Cup car, the same wheel and tire package from a Grand Am GTD car from 2015. So we're taking all the other technologies and trying to put it into a package and still keep it air-cooled, still keep all this stuff, but it's going to be Motec injected. The turn signals will turn off when you turn the wheel based on a potentiometer on the wheel. So there's a lot of fun things that you can do that let's say the whole spawn of that project was a customer started at, I would like to build an engine. And then, what can we do? I was on the list for a Singer, which thank goodness, because his budget opened up quite a bit when he looked at what that cost. But I think those two vehicles have left the imagination open now. And now we're able to almost use those budgets as kind of a, hey, this is what you get here. Where do you want to go with it? And now with technology of 3D scanning, and we're doing a lot of 3D printing with metals and wild exotic materials, and the inside of a control arm looks like the bone inside your arm. I mean, there's a lot of neat things that we're able to bring technology-wise because, and I hate to say it, but the budgets are allowing that, and people want what they want. If they don't want to check the box, they want to make their own menu. I want this, and I want, as Freeman was saying, I want the greenhouse to remain, and then make everything else work well. So
where the money is.
I just want to add one thing that people don't tend to think about is serviceability, right? That's what I've always been brought up to focus on is, can these cars be serviced? What happens if you break down in the middle of Texas? Right? So the approach that we have always taken, a lot of the guys on here is, like Rod, for example, we build with original parts. You can go into any dealership, and especially now with the classic programs, a lot of these old parts are now available. So you could drive your car from here to New York, and should you break down in BFE, you're going to be able to go to a dealership and find a clutch cable or an accelerator cable or a gasket or what have you. And when you get into these Wazoo Singers and Gunther Works cars, the problem is there's one of them, and they're not necessarily very serviceable without sending the car back to where it was built. And maybe that's part of the program that they've designed, but for a lot of people, that's not an option. So when I say I focus on using original parts and building that way back machine, a part of it is so that it remains a usable vehicle all the time, like Porsche had intended.
There you go. We have time for one more
I
question.
want to make a quick
ahead,
comment,
Bruce.
if I might. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. And we've done these panels in the past. We did one with Jay Leno and Donald Osborne and the head of RM and David Gooding, and we sat around what's hot and what's not. And after about an hour and a half or 2 hour conversation, it came down to one word: Porsche. That is the future and the present, and for me, the past. But I look across the people that are here in this room, which represents every demographic and every age group, and it really speaks volumes as to what's trending, and it's Porsche. But I also want to thank Dan Kahn, the gentleman down here with the
There he is
blue.
over there in the corner.
Dan put this together.
He did a great job.
Yeah. Dan is on the board of our Checkered Flag 200. We are breaking every attendance record. We're going to have over 500,000 people through the museum this year, and it's a great effort and a great tribute to Dan's public relations. And you've got Terry Cargus, who represents the older generation, and right next to him, to our executive director and our deputy executive director, Michael Bodell, who is in his 20s and wiser than anybody I've ever met. And so the two of them are the genius behind the museum, and we're just so happy that everybody's here enjoying the place like it should be. And I want to thank the panelists so much for giving up your Sunday and for being here, and everybody in this room. So be sure and enjoy the Porsche Effect. And one other, I just have to, mention one thing. As Terry knows and Michael knows, when Wolfgang Porsche, they did their corporate board meeting here when they opened the Experience Center. And so I just happened to be here that day in a coat and tie, which is like, maybe it's happened twice since we opened. And I ran into Wolfgang Porsche. We just became best friends, and we walked through here. We had the Bugatti exhibit. I said, we can celebrate your anniversary, your 70th anniversary, right here in the Petersen Museum. We hit it off famously. He's my new best friend. We're honoring him on the 5th, so be sure and calendar that. But when we put it all together, it was our exhibit team, our great museum team here, and they came up with the name Porsche Effect. And I had this idea of Porsche's 70th, the pursuit of excellence. And I thought, where did they come up with this name, Porsche Effect? So I came in here, I said, we got to rename this thing. So I sat down with Michael and Brian, and they explained to me the Porsche Effect, which now it's like branded, and it represents everything in here. The effect on hot rodding, the effect on design, one of the few marks that have kept their profile, very similar. It's very obvious, whether it's and their design in watches and architecture. The Porsches had such an enormous effect on everybody in this room. So I congratulate you all for coming up with a great name, Porsche Effect, and we just hope that everybody's enjoyed the exhibit. And again, thanks so much. And to you, Spike.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
And on that note, and don't forget a tremendous Guy Allen poster. That the poster art for Porsche Effect was incredible. How about a round of applause for these guys? Thank you so much, panel. Thank you for spending $25 to come see us talk. See you next time.
Real quick before we go, here's some useful car tips you might not be aware of. A coffee filter and a little bit of olive oil can clean your interior. Removing excess weight from your car will improve gas mileage, and you can place your key fob to your chin to increase its range. That's pretty weird, right? Well, here's another tip you also might not know about. TrueCar also helps people get used cars. That's right. TrueCar isn't just for buying new cars. With their certified dealer network and nationwide inventory of nearly 1 million used cars, you'll enjoy real pricing on actual inventory and a simpler buying experience, whether you buy new or used. And with TrueCar, users can see what others paid, so they know if they're getting a good deal before they're buying. They're also more likely to enjoy a faster buying experience by connecting with TrueCar certified dealers. When you're ready to buy a new or used car, check out TrueCar and enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Some features not available in all states.
Thanks for listening to Spike's Car Radio. Download new episodes every Wednesday on the Podcast One app or subscribe now at Apple Podcasts or PodcastOne.com.
New to Podcast One, the producer's guide with Todd Garner. Join Todd as he interviews the biggest names in Hollywood, like Adam Sandler.
We drove down there and my brother's like, do you have your material? I said, what do you mean?
Rebel Wilson.
I couldn't interact with these people, so I put on this American accent and pretended to be American.
And Isla Fisher.
I just wrote a passionate letter explaining how much I wanted to be a clown, begging them to accept me.
Download new episodes of the producer's guide with Todd Garner every Thursday on PodcastOne.com, the Podcast One app, or Apple Podcasts.
This time of year, you double down on cheer. So does Dunkin'. That's why they have twice the signature lattes with minty peppermint mocha and creamy toasted white chocolate, both handcrafted with rich espresso. Grab one today. America runs on Dunkin'. Price and participation may vary. Limited time offer. Terms apply.
You love podcasts. The stories, the laughs, the unexpected turns. But when this episode ends, the silence starts. Not anymore. Audiobooks.com turns that silence into your next great adventure. With over 450,000 titles, from bestsellers to hidden gems, your love for listening just found its new best friend. And because you already know the joy of audio, we're giving you 3 free audiobooks to start your journey. Imagine your favorite podcast, now with unlimited episodes. That's audiobooks.com. Keep the story going. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. Because for podcast lovers like you, the end of an episode is just the beginning. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.